All right, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order at 7:05 PM. Can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. I'll just squint. Okay, so we call the meeting to order. Verbal roll call. Do we need to do that?
I think our clerk has recorded the attendance, so we're okay.
Okay, so we need to open the floor for chair to, open for nominations.
Start with the chair.
The chair? Okay, so we need to nominate a chair for this committee. Is there any nominations for chair? Are there any volunteers? No, no nos? Is there any what?
I was trying to raise Walter's hand, but
Oh, Walter's volunteering?
I think I heard Della and Walter both just now.
Oh, okay.
volunteer.
I think Walter, would you like to volunteer to be the chair? Okay. Do we vote on that? Second? Oh, is there?
I nominate Walter.
Okay, we have a second. And we vote, right? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Yay, Walter's the chair. Okay.
Take over, Walter.
So we need a vice chair.
Nominations for vice chair.
I nominate Della Sini. Is there a sec? Oh, sorry.
Second, okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Alrighty.
Excellent.
Board budget message presentation, Officer Harding. Oh,
Yep.
entertain approval of minutes for the meeting for May 9th, 19.
And that the motion has to be
2023.
made and seconded by somebody who was at that meeting, although everybody can vote once those motions are made.
I'll move to approve the minutes from the budget meeting held on May 9th, 2023 as presented.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Budget message and presentation, Budget Officer Harding.
Great job, Walter. Thank you. All right, so for us, to streamline the meetings, one of the things that we have been doing is printing the budget messages out in advance, and that's in your packet here. There's no members of the public here, so I'm not gonna read this budget message. Basically, the budget message is just a high level summary of any of the milestones within the budget and just talks about the budget efficiency and some of the things that we're doing. And then one of the things we do that's a little bit different than a lot of places, we include this budget highlight. And this is so readers who don't really want to go through the budget line by line, or maybe they don't even know what those numbers mean, can pick out information on some of the things that we're doing, what some of our goals are, what some of our projects are, and our challenges throughout the year. So I just wanted to point that out to the budget committee. And do you have any questions on any of that before we go ahead and start moving into the proposed budget? Okay. So budget message and so we're going to do the presentation. After the presentation, then we'll do public comment. We'll open a public hearing for the shared revenue as we typically do. So Josh, let's go ahead and bring up our presentation slide, our model, I think. You have to do it. So, most of the members know either from the pre-budget workshop that we did last week or from past meetings that we employ what we call our forecasting model, which is the same information that's found in our official budget forms, the LB ones, which is what's printed in your manual. So we'll follow along, but everything will be exactly the same. And so we're going to go ahead and start with the general fund. We'll work through each fund. And if you have any questions, just simply stop at that point that you have a question and we'll address it. Or you could save it till the end and we're happy to do that too. And so what Josh is going to put up on the screen is he's going to put up, first we'll look at the budget, the fund overall performance now and projected, and then we'll go down through the last year's budget and what's proposed this year fund. So let's look at the overall performance tab at the top. Yeah. That's our projection. So you can see by the panels, we have 23, 24 actual, we had what was projected, 20, and then 25, 26, 24, 25, which is this year, 25, 26, 26, 27, and so on. And in the general fund, we appropriate, or our policy is to try to have our ending fund balance remain at a 90-day operating level of the entire fund. And if you look at row column 9 there, that goes across there, Josh has got it highlighted. The green indicates that we are above that 90-day, which you can see we are, those numbers below represent the 90-day. And the one that's pink, it's not red, is just a few thousand below, but that's out in 28, 29. So general fund is looking really good. No issues with general fund. And we've actually this year made some additional transfers out to do one-time projects. General fund is property tax money comes in, about 90% of that goes out to police. And then the rest of the general fund is really a lot of one-time business revenues. So it's our most flexible fund, but it's also the one that we try not to tie a huge amount of ongoing expenses to. Except there's a portion of all the administrative staff is in general fund. So let's go down to this year's expenditures. Freeze the panels so that we can see it. But you all can follow right in your book, but it's going to be the same exact numbers. These numbers just transfer into our book. And what we'll do is we'll go through, we typically don't go through the revenues, but if you had a question about revenues, I'm happy to answer it. What we typically do is start at the expense line items. Which starts where it says personnel services right there. And then I'm just going to go through the things that are changed. Personnel services, we tend not to talk about. Those are set salaries and benefits by the council. And so if we go into 010601, that first line item, municipal court, that hasn't changed. I'm going to go down until I see a change. There is a slight change in dues and fees, which is 607. Does everybody see that in their book? That's just it's a $3,000 change to the some of our membership dues and fees have increased. The next one down is insurance. Now you can see that's a fairly large increase, which is like $13,000. There's a 20% increase in insurance liability premiums this year. And so that's what's represented there. 612 travel training. There's an increase there because a couple of years ago we bought new software, citywide software. And that's near completion to be programmed and loaded for our city. We've been 2 years getting ready for that conversion, and that we'll have to send at least 3 staff members for, I think it's a week. Is that what they said? About a week down to Utah. And they'll train on the software before they come up and begin the conversion. And so there's going to be some expense there. And I think we're looking pretty good down that column. $605. Oh, audit, yes. We put in quite a little bit more into audit this year because of 2 reasons. One, we haven't been told what the numbers are, but there is a semi-crisis in Oregon, meaning there's not enough auditors that are qualified or approved to be government auditors. So we're going to see some increases there. Plus, because we were so successful in getting a lot of the grants, we're going to have either some informal audits from third-party granting agencies, or we're going to have 1-year federal audits. And we're not really sure yet, but we figured we better go ahead and load some more into the audit expense line to cover those. Well, we've been using legal a lot more lately. There's been the 1 year and the 2021 year, we were rewriting a number of our ordinances so that we switched over from a local private attorney to a firm, and the cost of that firm was higher, but we got much more specialized expertise. And then we had a program where we redid many of the city ordinances because they were out of compliance with a lot of state law. And what we have found is we're constantly new legislative laws, new court cases. We're constantly updating franchise agreements. And so we've just been utilizing quite a bit. So that's why we're keeping it at that. So that's an in and an out. So that's money. If we get the money in, people come in and the county provides building inspection services for the city. And they acquire their permit at the city. We send it for processing to the county. And if anybody's getting any type of a structural permit, that comes in through the city. That number right there represents maybe a few houses or maybe a project or 2 within the city, and then some private stuff. But on the previous page. Yeah. Yeah. So if we get the money that comes in, we'll expend the money going out. But typically that line item we don't get that much in, we don't spend that much. So in the past, we actually did budget a higher number thinking we were going to get new housing starts, but we just haven't done a lot of that. You guys are doing a great job of picking out those questions, by the way. I really appreciate it. Thank you. If you go down to recreational activities and corn festival activities, recreational activities are all the events the city hosts throughout the year, except for corn festival. Corn festival has its own line item. And we've increased the corn festival for a couple of reasons. One, we've been a little bit more successful getting donations. And then at the end of the day, whatever profit we make from corn festival, we redistribute to the local nonprofit organizations. And so that tends to be around $20,000. We think this year it could be even higher. And then councils, through our discussions in planning for corn festival, wanted to have flexibility for things like, the music and different things like that. We wanted to just make sure that there was enough in there as we go through the next year to cover some of that. So we wanted some more flexibility. If we had a tight budget, we might not, be so flexible there, but we've got a good budget in the general fund. So we wanted to give council some flexibility. And then if you go down to line item 804, which is our capital line item, typically this is some of those projects that meet council's goals throughout the year. And we typically do about $100,000 in there. We put 160,000 because we're anticipating getting a $60,000 grant from the county through their Community Prosperity Fund. And they have a new program this year that they've let us know that we could get. Typically, they give you 15,000 a year. This year, they're going to up it to 20. And then they did a new thing this year where you could get it 3 years all at one time if the funds are available. So we're anticipating trying to get the 60 and to do a larger project in the city. We'll have after the budget's passed, we'll sit down with the council and talk about all of those various projects. But the statues out front, that was a project that we did from this fund. The reader board sign, the dog park. A few years ago, we did some ADA playground equipment. So those are the types of things we're talking about there. And then if you go down to the transfers out, you can see we transfer most of the property tax goes out to the police fund. We're increasing the park fund transfer out a little bit this year because we do expect to get a park grant, or we're hoping to get a park grant. And if we do, we need that matching fund. And then major office equipment. Yeah, that's about it. And then the rest is we have some contingency, and then the reserve for future expenditure. That's money that just lays in there that can't be spent through the budget process. Everybody good with that one? The reserve for future expenditures is just whatever's left over. The contingency tends to be around 15%. Yeah. That's kind of I think that's the mark that OGFOA kind of says is a good benchmark. And then Fund 11, which is our police fund, which is on the next page. We're going to look at what the police fund looks like here at the high level first. And so you can see at least through 25, 26, if we were to spend everything that's budgeted, which typically doesn't happen, we're pretty good with the police fund. We don't keep a 90-day reserve line with the police fund because most of the revenue with the police fund comes through the general fund, and we've got a 90-day reserve there associated with it. And so we don't need to keep it twice. So we don't have a 90-day reserve target there. But the police fund is almost all, I mean, it's 90% staff, where most of our other funds are 90% material and services. And so, it's just one of those funds, but we're looking pretty good through 25, 26. We're probably doing fine in 26, 27, 27, 28. All things considered, because of two factors. One, we're not going to spend everything that's budgeted because we just never really did that. And two, we expect to see some more increases in our property tax revenue. Got some new projects that are going to come online, and that'll help add a boost to so we're not really concerned with the police fund. Now, I have to mention it, although I in my mind, I'm struggling to even say the words, but I'm going to do it because you are the budget committee. We do have the public safety fee that's initiated in the city. That originally was calculated for 5 years. We're well beyond the 5 years. It's supposed to increase after 5 years. We have not done that. That money goes directly into the police budget. It never touches any other fund because it's dedicated through the ordinance to, that can't be used anywhere else. And so we're actually well beyond that. We're not expecting to propose any changes to that at this moment. Some of that is because, again, we don't ever always spend every single thing that's budgeted. Sometimes you have a position that becomes vacant, takes a few months to fill that position. You end up getting a little bit of money from that, or you don't spend all your materials and services line items. So,
I have a question, Ron,
yeah,
on that, because I don't remember what the ordinance reads. Is that police fee directed strictly to the hiring of staff, or is it just general police fund?
it's all the things that it takes to operate a police department. It's cars, personnel, benefits, material.
Not that $12 fee that we have? When, I don't know if it's the right conversation for this place or not. When the fee was implemented, was that the original intention? Okay,
Well, because you can't have an officer if you can't put gas in their car, you can't buy them a car, you can't buy them a uniform. So it's anything that's related specifically to police. None of that money can go anywhere else or be pulled back for any other reason. The other thing is when we adopted that ordinance, that's helped benefit in our calculation, we said that we thought property tax transfers would grow at 3%. They've grown at much higher rates than 3%. So that's been a bit of a benefit too. So that's one of the reasons we're
from development? Okay.
from development. Yeah. Yeah. And it could be, you know, we've got that large commercial application. I don't know what their horizon would be, but if they were to come in and just start building in the next year and occupying storefronts and stuff, it could be that the service fee becomes a mute issue. I mean, because, you know, that's a huge boost to the property tax rolls. So we just don't know what the effect of that would be until after it's implemented. All right, so we're going to skip personnel services, although just if you look at that, you can see that employee costs and benefits with police are really the factor. That's what really adds to the budget. We did add a legal fees line under 603 to police because we've been paying for those attorney services specific for police out of the general fund, and they really should come out of the designated fund where those services are being used. So we added that. The council did provide a benefit. There's occasions where the officers need legal representation, but that representation can't come from the city because of the nature. If there's a shooting and they have to go through like a 111 hearing or something like that, they need to have their own counsel, and we would pay for a benefit up to $3,500 for officer in that position. But if you keep going down through there, other than the dispatch and records management, which is a contract we have with Woodburn, which does most of the dispatch services, we're looking good up to that point. That is just their pro rata inflationary increase that I think it was 4% that they put on us this year, something like that. Telecommunications, we did up telecommunications a little bit because we just got a new phone system. It's supposed to save us money, but the initial upfront cost, the first 3 years is a little higher. And so we don't really know what the outside cost. We wanted to have some cushion there. If you go down to vehicle expense, 623, we just put a few $1,000s extra in there because we did acquire some more vehicles. And we've got some aging vehicles that we're still utilizing. Everything is the same down to dues and fees. That is really the same issue with the general fund. A lot of our dues and fees that we subscribe to associations that we have to belong to. A lot of those have increased just because of what's happening out in the world. I don't know. We're the only ones that struggle with increasing our fees, but everybody else, they don't have a problem doing it. um, community programs. That is their toy drive, their National Night Out program. We put in just a little bit, $1,000 extra in there. And then the rest of those total materials and services are the same. And I think if you go down to 852, which is the vehicle replacement fund, last year we put in $85,000 transferred into that vehicle replacement fund because we wanted to purchase 2 new vehicles. This year we did a $30,000 transfer because the last time we purchased vehicles and this time we purchased vehicles, the vehicles doubled. And so we increased the amount in our replacement fund. We are now going to have to make a slight adjustment to that because one of our older vehicles got wrecked and totaled. And so we're going to recommend getting another car in this fiscal year to replace it. The good news is we got at least $29,000 from the insurance company for a car that's 5 years old. I don't know how we did that, but I'll take it. Because a new car is $68,000. So.
That doesn't, is that with everything it needs to be converted into a police car? Or is that just?
The 68 is with everything.
Okay.
That's all the equipment and the decals and all of the lights and computers.
All the bells and whistles.
Yep, everything.
All the things.
Yeah, the cars are about, I think the cars are about 46 or 48,000 now. They do have special equipment in them. They're built for police cars. So they've got special transmissions and brakes and things like that, but you know, it's just, they are up. So we'll do that $30,000 transfer. And I think in the vehicle replacement fund, you'll also see us with that insurance money coming in so that we can go ahead and buy that car. Other than that, I think we're looking good on this budget. I don't see any issues, but if you have a question, I'm happy to answer. Okay. Good. Okay, let's go to the water fund. One thing I do like about being able to show you where the fund is trending is it is a really good communication tool for the sustainability of the city's finances. If you're just doing a 1-year budget, you only know that you're fine in that year, but you don't know what the next year holds. So we proposed a 3% increase in water rates every year. That's what we've got programmed in over time to meet the rate of inflation. We've been lucky that we've been able to absorb the higher rate of inflation beyond 3% through the fund and been able to pass that along for the most part to our consumers. So if you look at our fund, the pink is just below the 90-day. It's not minus. You have to get further out, 28, 29. But the reason why we don't worry about that, we really just look at the first 3 to 4 years horizon in a utility fund, because a utility fund does have a lot of line items that we return every year. If you look at the actual versus spent, we'll go through, show you some of those examples. We have to budget for it because of the way Oregon sets their budget law in motion. If we don't budget for breakdowns and kind of worst case scenarios, and we have one, we can't act. We can't just go out and commission somebody to do work without the authority to spend the money. So what has to happen is we have to reconvene the budget committee, and that is a process. We've got to notice the public, just like we did for this meeting, and you can't react for emergency shutdowns that quick with your utilities. So we're going to return money in each of these years, and so we know that, and this is not a concern for us from a forecasting standpoint. So let's go to the expenditure page. The resource page, you'll see is very short. Because our only resource for the utility, really, there's some minor things that we get, little pieces of meters and different things like that, but most of the revenue is ratepayers. One thing I will show and I'll point you to this attention is if you look at 12,413. No, I'm sorry, 12,402, and look at the interest. I mentioned this at the workshop meeting, but I'm going to mention it. We received $32,000 in interest because the interest rates are really high in our risk pool that all of our money sits in a citywide pool of money, and so 32,000. If you look back in 21, 22, we got 3,000 in interest. So that is also helping to augment some of that inflationary increase a little bit. Okay, so we're going to go down to materials and services. You'll see a theme. We put a little bit of money in for legal funds into the water utility. And again, that's our effort to align some of those legal expenses with the operation. You'll see audits we did that for every fund because we're not really sure what the audit is going to be. Dues and fees went up a little bit. Insurance, that represents that increase in insurance. Travel training, that's for that increases for that software training that we have to do. And then you get to telecommunications. Again, that's the new phone system implemented. And you get down to engineering. We just put a little bit of money in engineering because we've been taking some engineering costs out of like our capital improvement funds that are really not a capital improvement. It might be a technical question about something that's going on with the facility or something that we need that's in a planning stage, but not a capital stage. So we just put a little bit there. Investment expense.
Spend $1 on a couple of things.
It's not much.
No, it wasn't, but when I saw that, I just went, what is that dollar?
That could have probably come out of miscellaneous or something, but, and then we're looking good. So if you go down to capital outlay, if you go to 807, those 3 line items or 4 line items that you see there, those are examples of some things that we put in there to have some cushion for like some event that occurs. But you can see we actually haven't spent anything out of those line items over the last few years. So those are things that typically that would get returned back to the fund. If you even used them 1 year and didn't use them over the next 3 years, it would change those 2 end years back to green. So just not utilizing that. So that's why I say we feel pretty good. Major office equipment reserve. We didn't budget into any line items this year for major office equipment because we feel like that reserve fund is good. And that's where that software comes out of. It's where a lot of our computers come out of that have to be replaced. Our servers, if they have to be replaced, it comes out of that fund. And we feel like we're good this year. So we didn't need to just stockpile anything in that fund for the purpose of doing that. Vehicle replacement fund, we did up that contribution because again, vehicles aren't cheap anymore. We used to get a truck off the state list, the discount list that we had subscribed to for, $30,000, and we just can't get a truck for that. When we started to do these vehicle replacement programs, the cost of the vehicles were just way cheaper. So, and then you go down to the Public Works Equipment Fund. So we kept that the same. That's the money that goes into would buy lawnmowers, backhoes, the building that we did, the capital building project, the debt on the building. And so we kept that up. And then to the Water Improvement Fund, 659, that's the same. We have a target where we do at least $100,000 a year into the Water Improvement Fund. That transfer into that improvement fund is where we do our capital projects. Drill a well, working on the reservoir. That money it's dedicated to a capital water project, but it's more flexible of the list of projects that we had to do a water line, anything that was water related, we could take it out of that fund. The water system development charge funds are dedicated line items to only those things that are on our improved capital facilities list. So that's the difference. And then just the normal contingency and reserve for future expenditures. So do you guys have any questions about that one? Okay. So now we're going to go to the sewer fund.
Yeah. You heard Katie. It's fund, not fun.
It's not fun. Well, I mean, I hate to be excited about sewer, but I am a little excited because of where we are versus where we could be. But so if we look at the sewer fund, now this one's not doing as well as the water fund. We totally understand that. We're not gonna drop below our 90-day reserve in 24, 25, and we're not gonna do it in 25, 26. I think we're gonna be good in 26, 27, 28, 29. If we did nothing, this would be if we did nothing. However, next year is the year we're gonna do a rate adjustment because of the sewer treatment facility. Those numbers aren't going to be nearly as scary as we thought. Yay. But they will be significant. So we're not really concerned about this fund because we're going to do basically a reset next year. And we're really good for 3 or 4 years. So we have some flexibility. So we're not really concerned. So we propose just to keep the 3%. Not change that beyond that, because next year the increase is going to be much higher in a percentage, but certainly much lower than what we told everybody. Total bills, about $180 increase. A couple of years ago, we were able to get a bunch of grants. We lowered that to like $100, $120. Increase. We were able to get some more grants, and we told everybody $80 this year. Help of a consultant that really goes through and looks at those variables for us. We think that number is going to be probably under $40-ish, but I don't want to give you an exact number. Certainly way better than we anticipated. And considering that we're building a $30 million treatment facility. Okay, let's go through our expenditures. Again, this is like the other fund. We did also benefit from our investment. So that was good. You're going to see some consistent themes with the water fund here. It's really those things that we saw programmed increases. Is what we changed. Otherwise, this is pretty much a hold the line budget as well. So legal expenses, again, we decided that was a line item we really needed to start to populate for each fund. We may or may not spend anything out of it. If we don't, it just goes right back to our beginning fund balance. Audit, again, we raise that across funds, dues and fees, insurance. We actually didn't raise insurance in this one, and I don't know if that was an oversight on our part or if we thought it was good. You're good with that one, because we didn't actually need to spend that much this year, I see. Energy costs, the sewer fund actually is the one fund that really has a huge energy bill to it. Because of all the aerators out in the treatment facility, they're constantly going, so they utilize a lot of energy. So we did program a little energy increase there. Travel training again for that software package training. Telecommunications, we did less, but a little bit more. Looks pretty good. Running through there, I don't really see any changes. Again, capital outlay, you could say, we don't always spend that money. It's just like there was a major repair. We needed some money from a few other sources. That's where we'd take it from. So when you get down to debt service, which is 870 and 871, one is the principal and one is the interest. This is a loan the city's had for 10 or 15 years. And that's the debt service. It's actually the only debt that outside of the new debt we just took on for the public safety building or the public workshop that the city has had. So the city is actually in a really good position. Much better than most cities from a debt perspective, have very little debt. If we had to take on some debt, we actually could even take on debt without raising rates because we could use that transfer money as a debt payment. So we've got options as a city if we run into any milestones as we move forward. Vehicle replacement fund, again, we did up that a little bit. The public works equipment fund, we did up that because we need to have that aligned with the water fund. We can't take more from one utility than the other. They're both equally utilizing that fund for equipment and facilities. And then the sewer improvement fund, that's the 100,000 that goes into that capital reserve fund. And then just contingency and or reserve for future expenditures. So do you have any questions about sewer? Sewer, it's just a crazy world. All right, no questions. We'll move on to our street fund. Are you doing okay? Good. Anybody need water or a restroom break, anything like that? Let's just take a 2-minute pause. If you need water, I've got water in the fridge. Just raise your hand and I'll get you one. Want one? You'd like one? Couple? Okay. Did you want one water?
I'm good for now. Thank you.
Carrie, are you doing okay?
Wake up, Carrie.
No, I'm here. Sorry.
I
had
just
to
want-
get to the microphone. I'm doing great. Thanks.
Okay. All right, we ready to continue forward? Everybody good? We're way ahead of schedule, so I like our pace so far. In the street fund, which is Fund 14, which is, here's our projection. A few years ago, this fund actually had some negative trend to it. So we've kind of turned this fund around a little bit. There's been some contributing factors. We have been getting a little bit more revenue from our, from the state per capita share that we get has actually helped out. Interest in this fund has really helped out, with this fund. Cause it's not I mean, it's a lot of money for, you know, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. It seems like a lot of money, but, in the scheme of things, that's not a lot in the street world, right? So, but if you look at the performance bar, which is bar 9, we look really good moving forward. And the street fund does have ongoing expenditures, but we also do projects out of this. So, we do have some proposed dollars for projects in there as well. Looking good. Go ahead and go down to the expenditure. I'll just point to the committee, just a note. We did receive a $250,000 small city allotment grant to do 3rd Street from Main to Church. And so Main to Cleveland, I'm sorry. Main to Cleveland, that 2-block stretch, and we'll do both sides. Even where there is sidewalks, those will come out because they need to be upgraded to the new standard. So, we'll be. I think it's where like the old animal clinic, right there where that area is headed down. Yeah, there's a lot of, you know, non-conforming residential properties that are in the downtown district, but by upgrading the streets, we'll have street parking, which has been an issue there. But we'll also have parking in the downtown core because we'll have curb and gutter and sidewalk and everything. People to walk, yeah. We've been systematically kind of going through the downtown core, doing these little projects, so. All right, so let's go down through expenditures. And so we'll start with the materials and services. Supplies, we did put some money in a supply line item, 604. And I think that's because traditionally we haven't really had a streets program. It's been really kind of a hodgepodge of other funds that we've kind of used. And so things like cold patch for potholes and things like that. Audit, we just slightly raised it in the street fund. I think we're kind of relying on the 3 major operating funds for audit if we have a one-time audit. We don't have any grants other than the $250,000 grant wouldn't be one that we'd have a 1-year federal audit on. So we put that into those funds where we got grants that would be impacted. Insurance up just a little bit. That's just passing along increases. If you get down to maintenance and repair, we did upgrade that a little bit. One of the things we're really struggling with is we're not keeping up. We need a lot more than this. We're not keeping up on the streets as they age. So I think if you've been driving the city streets through the old neighborhoods, there's a lot of cracking and alligatering of the asphalt. And a lot of that is because just when they were installed back then, our standard was different. And today our standards, technology changes and you realize your standard has to be at a different level to maintain those through time. And so a lot of our streets are going to have to get rebuilt. Of course, this isn't for rebuilding. What this is for things like crack sealing and tar and fixing the manholes and those kinds of things. And then street lights, that's all the same. That's all the same. So if you get down, the major proposal that we have in here is 808, which is street improvements. And last year, we dedicated 490,000 because we thought we were gonna actually implement that Third Street project last year. And that was about $400,000. 390-ish is what they said. We're not gonna get that done. As a matter of fact, it's not even gonna get started in this fiscal year. So we rolled that over for next year. But we also have funds available, so we added about another $350,000 to $400,000 into improvements. And there's a number of fill in the gap projects in the downtown core that we would like to propose to council. We will not spend the money, obviously, unless council approves the projects. And we haven't had that conversation yet, but one of the things we're really weak in is downtown parking. And we get new businesses that want to move in and they can't afford to spend the capital to improve the parking to meet our parking requirements. And so a lot of times they end up going to other locations. And we just don't really have enough downtown parking even to meet the needs. Our city hall complex is often used for parking for other businesses. And so if we have fill in the gap opportunities, these are places where we can put in curb and sidewalk. One, it's a pedestrian friendly environment, which is what we want in the downtown core. And then the other thing, it'll encourage more commerce to come down into the downtown core. So that's kind of part of our whole economic development strategy. Want to encourage that ID zone to develop, but we don't want to lose the downtown identity, and there will be a place for businesses in both, at least in our vision there. So that is the major change. Do you guys have any questions about streets? Okay. Oh, I actually missed a page, but it's the Public Works Fund, the vehicle replacement transfer, and then the contingency page there. Okay, Park Fund. Usually I'm getting like inundated with budget committee members on stuff. So I'm feeling pretty, I'm like, oh, this is
Well,
going really smooth.
I don't know, we've talked about this a lot. I mean.
Yeah. I'm not saying you guys aren't doing your part
Make
because the
questions, Ron.
inundation usually has nothing to do with the budget, but
Like a refresher.
Actually, at the last meeting, you answered a lot of my questions and I.
yeah, the budget workshop does really help get to that level, you know.
My questions, Ron, I can come up with all sorts of controversial questions.
I'll pass. Yeah. Pick a pass. Park Fund. Look at that. So Park Fund is kind of always been like the street fund. We really struggled with it over the years. It's always been one of those that had the red dips, and the Park Fund's actually looking really good. Part of that is because a lot of the Park Fund comes from the general fund, and the general fund's looking good. Part of it, but we also get, this is where we park our state shared revenue. This is where we recommend that money goes to. Got a few other sources of revenue coming into that. And interest, a few years ago, our interest for the year was $1,500. This year, our interest. You get that year after a couple of years, those are pretty good chunks of money. We have telecommunication leases. These are the leases on our cell towers. We dedicate that money to the Park Fund along with the shared revenue. And those leases have increased. So Park Fund's actually looking really good, and we're going to be able to propose some projects this year. So let's go ahead and move down to, if you're okay, 610, which is supplies. That's not changing. We did change energy cost a little bit because the parks do consume some energy. So maintenance and repairs, we're leaving all of that the same. That's all hold the line. Placement of equipment. Again, these are one of those line items where we put it in there. We don't often spend it, but we do put it in there. If you get down to site improvements, we have $200,000 in there. That's one, if we get the grant that we're wanting to get, we'll need some match for that. If we don't get the grant, or even if we do get the grant, we've got some extra money in here. We have some park projects we really have to do. We've got some equipment that needs to be replaced, that's aging and, starting to develop, sharp edges and different things like that. It's just not good to let that equipment age too long. So we're going to propose changing out some of our park equipment. Not for this. For this, I'm thinking probably Porter Boone has really got some old equipment and playground equipment. Yeah. And we'll probably make a proposal depending on if we get that grant or don't get the grant. We'll probably ask for some money out of here and some money out of that general fund capital line item that we have to do something out in the park. It's to buy the large piece of playground equipment like we have in Porter Boone. It's between like $120,000 and $200,000 just for that playground equipment. Grossly expensive. Unfortunately, you can't these days build your own because you take on all the liability when you do that. In the old days, we'd get a big work party together and go out there and construct some jungle gyms and things like that. And they don't really allow that anymore. Any questions about park? Again, funds looking good. I'm really happy with where we are. It was much easier to do the budget this year than in previous years, so. Public Work Equipment Fund. I don't think we need to, we can look at the results page, but this is really a reserve fund for capital expenditures for the public works shop. So we'll take the loan payment, $63,000 is what our loan payment is on the new building. We may even have a plan to accelerate those payments and pay it off early. But that's a low interest loan that we got through Business Oregon to finish our +$1 million shop building. And then it's not the Public Works Equipment Fund, is it? No. There we go. There's a public work. So you see, these are the transfers that come in from each of the utility that have to pay for equipment and or the facility. So that fund looks pretty good. For now, we don't have any issues. We did just pick up a used street sweeper. I don't know if any of you have seen our street sweeper out and about in the city, that green one. You know what's there?
Because you went around the car.
Yeah, I think that's like 25 or 30 years old or something. It's pretty old. A new street sweeper is $400,000. And we picked up one that is less used than the used one that we have from another city for $7,500. So those are it's hard to come to
Less
council and say we need a $400,000 truck to sweep the streets. So we just look for those ways to keep things going for a while. If we bought a new one, it would last a long time. And at some point when we get into a stormwater utility, typically that's one of the first pieces of equipment that you buy, but we're not there yet.
I don't think that's a hard ask, Ron.
Yeah. So anyway. One city's junk is another city's treasure.
Hey, we can get it for under 10,000 and
Yeah, that's what I said.
it runs, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it runs and it looks good. It looks better than the other one.
I have visions of that old Simpsons cartoon where he bought the snowplow to save the town.
Well, that
It's
was
our
the,
street sweeper.
that was the one prior to the green one. It was yellow and it actually looked like that, didn't it, Della? Yeah. I finally surplused that out a few years ago to state surplus. Yeah. Well, we lost money. Surplus charges is more than we got, but I think it's still a good plan.
It was worth it to get rid of it.
Yeah. So do you have any questions about the equipment fund? We want to build this fund up a little bit because we're gonna have to buy a new backhoe. Our backhoe is like everything else. It's 30 some odd years old. I just know that at some point that's gonna break and it's gonna be cost prohibitive to fix. And those are 350,000 or something like that. Does that sound right, Walter? Yeah. That's that.
Last repair.
Yeah. We tend to keep our equipment way longer than we should because we're trying to be good stewards of the money. But when you get to a point where you can't get parts, then you're stuck. So last night we approved a used forklift, mainly because not only because a new one's so expensive, but it won't be used daily. And we really don't need one that we can put thousands of hours on. So we bought a used one. So. All right. Special projects, which is the next fund, Fund 17. We have nothing in there, so we don't have anything proposed. Probably if we were to get like some large East Side Park grant or something, we'd probably end up parking it in this fund and working from here. Possibly, maybe. Oh, taking it out. Because we've changed the way that we do our capital things, so yeah, we could do that out of the park fund just as easy. Yeah. So when we use a fund or we quit using a fund, we have to wait, I think it's 3 years, right? 3 budget cycles before we can delete it and do something. Sewer improvement fund, which is 19. So you can see this has got a lot of money in it here. And this is part of our sewer treatment facility. Now, the improvement fund is not as restrictive as the system development charge fund. It's not going to matter with our sewer facility because we can spend whatever we got out of all funds and we're not going to hit any of those restricted barriers. But you can see we got $1.5 million in there. We received money into this fund from the direct American Rescue Plan. 963,000, I think, came into this fund through that. You can see, it's those two, 21, 22, 22, 23 transfers in. This is where we receipt in the Marion County ARPA grant. That was basically money that went to the county and then they redistributed from the rescue plan, the ARPA fund. So you can see all that coming in. And then our transfer in, we've been doing that every year to help build up that fund. So if you look, there's actually $2.5 million in there. And then we go down, we budget to kind of spend this money out to some extent, although we're not really going to get into a capital construction project this next year. It's really more about the design. But we have to spend the county's ARPA money this year between this fiscal year, so between now and next June. And we have to commit the direct ARPA funds for something this year. So we're starting to run up against that restrictive clock on those funds. We'll spend the county money. We may have to like piece something out of the sewer treatment facility and commit the money from that direct allocation to make sure that we don't get any of it clawed back from the federal government. There's a couple of things that we have to do. We haven't even talked to council about this yet, but there's the equipment, the equipment that actually does the treatment. They're called SBRs. And those are custom made for the design of your facility. And it takes at least a year for the factory to make those pieces of equipment. There's 2 that we're purchasing, 2 systems, different systems. and both of them are in excess of $1 million. And we'll have to commit to those and pay for part of that money up front. So that could be where some of that ARPA money goes. And that'll happen long before we actually even start to break ground, because they have to have that done in advance. So there's really not a lot to do with this fund at this moment. We're just spending those grant dollars on design at this moment. But if you have any questions, I can. But we're fortunate because, you know, there's a lot of money in this fund and we're getting a lot of earnings, $65,000 in earnings this year. So the longer we keep the money in there, the more, I mean, that's a good revenue stream. You know, it's nice to have. Okay, no questions. We'll move on to vehicle replacement. Okay, so this is the vehicle replacement. You could see those transfers in right there in the transfers in line item. And then if you go down to the outlay, Public Works has 125,000 in their vehicles. Now that sounds like a lot, but you know, if we were to purchase a couple of, I don't think we could even purchase 2 trucks. We might get one out of there with some money left over. One of the things that we're trying to do with Public Works is we're looking into some electric truck grants for a couple of reasons. Most of Public Works' use is local around the city. They don't typically drive, you know, they're not chasing anybody. I wouldn't want to have an electric police car, but you know, a Public Works vehicle could be electric. And so we're looking at some grants that would pay a large portion of the purchase of some vehicles. That's how we string our money out longer. We do have some old vehicles that could come out of this that need replaced, but we're looking for opportunities. Police vehicles. So originally we had proposed the 55,000. That wouldn't have gotten us another car. But remember, we're building this up each year so that we can buy the replacement vehicles as they become needed. But because we had that wreck car, we're going to have about 86,000 in here because that's where we'll receive in that insurance money. And it's about 64 to 68 for a fully equipped car. So we'll probably go ahead and replace that one. Could we get by without it? We could, but the vehicles aren't going to get cheaper. And what it does is it extends the life of those new vehicles because you spread those miles out further. So that'll help us out a little bit. So that's a vehicle replacement fund. Do you have any questions? Okay. So this is the city reserve fund, Fund 22. And this fund was set up many years ago. We haven't really altered it or changed it. We've used it when we've had like the ice storm. We use this fund to backfill some of the expenditures. But it's really just there as kind of an emergency fund. It can only be spent. So your approval of this fund doesn't show any expenditures. It just shows a ending fund balance, miscellaneous capital expense. We do have it in an expense line item, but under ordinance, or I think resolution, right, on this one, council set a resolution that says this money can't be touched without prior council authorization. So where the rest of the budget, once it's appropriated, the administrator can spend those money as needed, unless there's a contract or something for big capital outlay. But with this fund, that can't be touched without prior council approval. So we only really use this for some sort of emergency. If there was an emergency, we need a little bit of money, that's where we'd go look. One of the things that we did was implement the 90-day reserve balance in our funds. And that really is your emergency money. So this is probably less needed, but when you have a big event like the canyon fires, if that would have occurred here, or the tornado, I think was probably the reason the fund was originally established. some event like that where we need to have ready-made sources, resources that maybe help out a local business or resident or bunch of businesses or residents. That's what we'd use that for. Water System Development Charge Fund. System development charges are charges that we put on new construction. So developer comes to town, they're gonna build 10 houses. They have to pay a fee for each of those houses to buy into our system. That fee is a system development charge. Now, that money is restricted under state law. It can only be used for those projects that are on our capital improvement plan. That capital improvement plan is used to calculate what those fees are going to be. A lot of times, if the project is going to provide a growth equity, meaning we need a 200,000 gallon water tower, but we're going to build a 1,000,000 gallon water tower because we expect to grow over the time and we're going to need more fire flow and more capacity. That extra is growth related and can be assigned to a system development charge. But that 200,000 that we need for the existing community, that has to come out of some other source besides these funds. So that's just kind of an example. So in this fund, you can see we're planning a pretty good beginning balance, interest rate about $578,000 in that fund. Again, it's selective of the projects that we can use it for. This is water. And so as an example, we're doing the 1,000,000 gallon reservoir. We were able to get $3.5 million total in grants for that project. It's about a $4.5 million project all in. And so we'll end up putting in some of this money for we're not really budgeting this year to take in additional revenue. We've had a couple of years where we haven't really had any new housing starts, or we've had some very minor, like a couple of ADUs or something. So we're not really budgeting. We just haven't realized a lot of SDC money. Now we've got a lot of property that's primed for growth. My expectation is if that starts to rev up, we'll see those dollars come in next fiscal year. So that's when we'll be closer to collecting them and be able to. Now, that doesn't mean there's a few places around town. That doesn't mean that we couldn't see some surprise dollars come in, but we're fine waiting until they come into budget form. And then with a system development charge, we just kind of spread those expenditures out. And we typically, for capital improvement funds and for SDC funds like this, we budget to expend those. So if one of those projects get queued up or we need money for a project that's ongoing, we can draw on those funds. Any questions? Okay. Next one is Fund 27, which is the Major Office Equipment Fund. Again, these ones, that doesn't really, there's no reason to show you what the forecast looks like because we budget to spend these every year, even though we probably aren't going to spend them, but we do that. So this is that major office equipment. We're taking a year off of transfers from all these other funds into this fund because it's looking pretty good for what we have planned. But this is where we would replace our IT equipment, our new servers, our computers, systems, desk copiers, our software package came out of here, it lived here. So our software subscriptions, those types of things for the major administrative operations. And this is pooled, so all the funds transfer into this fund because they're central services that we pay that goes out to benefit the entire city. So, and if you see, we just have kind of the expenditure split out, and then we budget to spend all of it. We won't spend all of it, but we do budget to spend it all. A few years ago, we were having a lot of problems with our copy machine. And I think we paid like $15,000, but we had this lease agreement with this kind of shady company. I think they were shady, the way I felt about it. And they were charging us like 7 times what we could buy our cartridges off of Amazon for. And the contract that we paid more for the copy machine than probably we could have got one for. And then we're in this contract where we had to pay them so much a copy. And then we had to buy these cartridges, and the cartridges were like crazy dollar amount, $300 or $400 for a set of cartridges that we could get for like $100 off of Amazon. So I ended up ending that contract, but the machine kept breaking down and they weren't fixing it anyway. We ended up just buying a new machine for $10,000. It hasn't been a problem. And I think our contract, I think they provide the cartridges, don't they? We just pay the copy service fee or something under that one. It's a much better deal. But we wouldn't have been able to do that without the office improvement fund, so. All right, so here we are, water improvement fund. Now this is that money we're transferring in. So this is a capital fund. We can only spend this on capital projects, this money, but it does have more flexibility than system development charges. And this is where the you see the 3.257 million is in this year. There was $300,000 that made 3.5. This is the fund that largely we're paying for that water reservoir that's getting ready to start construction. And again, it's all expended out because it'll all be for a capital project. Sewer system development charge. Okay, same thing. This is a capital project. We've got almost about 800,000 in revenue coming into that fund. This will all go towards the sewer treatment facility. When we applied for those grants, one of the things that we had to do was leverage $2 million of city match. That was part of our granting application. We didn't have $2 million at the time, but we knew that we could come up with that through these various funds between the time we applied and the time we went to construction. So we're there. We're good. We're golden. And then again, we expend all of this out. We probably will not do anything with that this year unless we end up, because of that ARPA deadline, if we had to like take a portion of the plant and move it up. The plant also has other elements like upgraded collection system. These are the big pipes that go through the city, through the neighborhoods. Those will be upgraded on most of our older neighborhoods. And that's about $4 million. It could be that we end up doing that project first to get rid of some of those time dollars that we've got to spend. We just don't know. But if worse comes to worse, one of the things that we did was we separated that portion of the project and we had all of the engineering plans designed and engineered for it for 2 reasons. We wanted to be able to pull the trigger quick on it, and we can actually have a project under construction in 90 days. But also we thought, well, what we wanted to plan strategically, if there was some of that ARPA money that came in that other cities couldn't spend or the counties couldn't spend, nobody wants to give it back to the federal government. They'd rather give it to a neighboring city or another entity. And the state had a lot of money, the county had a lot of money, and we wanted to position to try to grab that before it went back. All right. So that is Fund 29. Fund 30 is our Transportation System Development Charge Fund. Again, this is money that can only be used for those capital projects that are on the SDC approved list. We've got about $600,000 in there, which is a great balance to have. And again, like all our other capitals, we show that we're expending this. We don't have a project in the queue for this, but it could be if the ID zone ends up developing. There's a portion of, they have to do a new intersection in Delmar. They have to extend that through the site. They have to do turn lanes, sidewalks, along, about anywhere from 120 to a 300-foot distance each way from that intersection. That project is on our CIP, even though the developer is going to end up paying for that as part of their development. But there may be an opportunity for us to grab some of these funds and continue that improvement out. So it doesn't end where their obligation ends. So when a developer comes into town, and we require them to do improvements, we have to apply what's called a proportionality test to that improvement, and can't require them to do improvements that aren't proportionate to their impact to the community, is a better way to say it, maybe. And so oftentimes you'll get a part of an improvement, maybe along the frontage of their properties, but it won't go beyond that. This one will go beyond that because they're going to be a traffic generator, but there will be areas that we'll probably want to look for increasing sidewalks. We may even want to upgrade some of the different streets that go into First Street near that connection there. So there's going to be some opportunity to spend some of these dollars. We also have Delmar East connection. That probably won't happen for a few years because there's a piece of property that's not inside the city limits that's in our way. But one of the things that we're working on is updating our system development charge CIPs. And we'd like to add the Delmar West connection, which is the connection on 11th Street in front of the school there. And we'd like to get that connection made because that would really help a lot of traffic that's coming around that could go through there and take some congestion off of the First Street intersection. So that could even be a project that we could fund with some of this money. Have to upgrade that CIP. So we got lots of possibilities. If we did a project like that, I would want to try to couple it with like a small city allotment grant, so we could get a better improvement. Questions about that? Yeah. Well, no, because those wouldn't be growth related. That would be more the regular street fund for like a crossing improvement, probably. They have to be, if there was a crossing improvement required from development, it would be done by the developer. It'd be a direct correlation to their development, not through SDC, but the street fund, the other fund, we could do a crossing improvement. If we could get the county to just give us, you know what I mean? Because these a lot of the crossings that you do are solar. And even if we wanted to do one in the downtown, there's electricity there. It's not that hard to connect. But you could do a lot of these crossings for $10,000, $15,000. They're not grossly expensive. Unless you're doing something that's like embedded into the concrete. But a lot of them that just have the signs that flash and you've got the paint, they're not. But yeah, we can do those. We've been busy with the sewer treatment, but I have not forgotten about crossings and trying to figure out how we get that approved. I'm slowly getting our city engineer on board to where I think we need to go. But I think we're getting there. 31, Fund 31 is bikeway and pedestrian. Now this could be used for crossings as well. But we actually are thinking that we'll have a project this year. This money comes in, it is we get a little bit of highway tax dollars that come in for this, and they do sunset. So you have to use them 9 years, within 9 years of receiving the revenue. We don't get a lot, but we usually get a few thousand a year, and then we let it build up and we try to do a project. But we've got some downtown sidewalks that we could do with this. This could be part of that project, or we also have that 11th Street fill in the sidewalk area that we have to do from Maine to Church? Cleveland, Maine to Cleveland, yeah. I always get Cleveland and Church mixed up because the church is not on Church Street. I think that's what confuses me.
And there has been one on Church.
I know, but I always think church on church, but
Maybe the plan was to put a church there. and then-
First Street can have.
First Street?
First,
Oh,
no, it's county too.
county, that's county two. First, Main and 11th are all county roads. I know. Yeah. Yeah, most of the people agree with us at the county that are the staff. It's the upper people that for some reason have got it in their head that,
I have a plan.
Yeah.
yeah.
Sarah had one too, but he never did.
I have a plan. I have, a mom plan. I'm just saying. The lines aren't straight. It's not my fault.
I haven't been able to dive deep into it, but honestly, I just think the city should just accept First Street and Main Street from the county. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't know what the process is or if the county is even amenable to that, but usually they are. Yeah. They would do to us what we do to them when they're out doing something bad. Right, Walter? I go give them a friendly knock on the door and say, oops. So then we got park system development charge dollars. Again, these are usually monies we expend all to go out. In this particular one, we probably are going to spend this money for a couple of reasons. One is we still have a little bit of debt on the 23 acres. And we have an interest that compounds every year. So Josh and I want to start paying that down. We really haven't gotten a lot of money into the system development. We've been waiting for the apartments or something to build, and then we were going to pay it off. That hasn't happened. So we're going to make a $30,000 payment this year. And I think Josh and I are looking at a payment again next year. And we're just going to try to get, we don't owe that much. It's under 100,000, I think. 115, so it's close to 100. So we don't owe that much, but we want to pay it down a little quicker than we've been paying it. So that's our plan there. It would be great if something built in the city. And I do think we're going to get something, but by the time we go through site development review and they go out there and do all the civil improvements, it's probably at least a year. So there's a couple of places around town that could build quicker, but it's, we don't know that it'll happen. The next fund is Storm Drain 34. We don't really get any money in here. There's just a little bit of dollars left in there from when we did the church project years ago. Yeah. Yeah, well, unfortunately, it's an SDC, so we can't do anything with it. So we plan to form a stormwater utility. We haven't done that yet. We've been dealing with this whole sewer facility thing. And so we'll need that. We'll need that fund once we do that. But right now it's just a paperwork administrative effort. There's nothing in this fund. When we were going to originally buy that property out there, we kind of set this up because we're trying to get like $1 million grant at the time, and we had anything in there for a long time. Yeah, probably. We've tried to simplify the budget the last few years. So instead of having all these different interacting funds, we're trying to put more things like park stuff in the park fund and then the last one that we have is Fund 36. This is the fund that we created for investing in families and children funds. So our summer reading program gets paid out of this fund. We've been putting money in there every year, but our volunteers have kept the expenses way down. And so we're building it up, but you know, if we wanted to do something related to, it could even be one of our community efforts for families and kids, we could take money out of. Occasionally, we might buy something out of here that's for like Superhero Carnival because it's really family oriented, but for the most part, this is really set up for the summer kids program. And that is the entire budget. And if you have any additional questions, I'm happy to answer them. I think it's a great budget. It's the best one I've seen since I've been here, I think. I think it's good. We've done a good job of keeping the money under control. So I'll turn it back over to our chair. And we do need to open a public hearing. We would announce what the public hearing is for. It's a public hearing to take public comments on the allocation of state shared revenue. We would announce the time. We would ask if there's any public comment. If there isn't any public comment, we could close the hearing and announce the time. And then, the first public hearing is on the budget. I'm sorry. Then the second public hearing would be on the state revenue share. Sorry that I didn't want to confuse you there.
Not confused at all.
Okay. If you follow my guidance, I can lead you down the wrong
Okay.
path sometimes.
At this time, we will open public comment on the proposed fiscal year 24-25 budget. Open the public hearing is now open. Do we have any public comment at 8:37 PM?
No one online?
Alrighty, with that, we will close the public hearing. At this point, we will close the public hearing at 8:38 PM. And next, we will open a public hearing for state revenue sharing. Chair to open, a public hearing for fiscal year 2024-25 state revenue sharing funds is now open at 8:38 PM. We will take public comment.
Or anybody online that would like to? Nope. Okay.
Alrighty, with that, we will close the public hearing at 8:38 PM. Alrighty. I think are we ready to?
I think we are because we actually went through each of the funds already.
Yeah.
And so there's two motions that we have to do, Josh, make sure that I'm correct. One is we have to make a motion to approve the 24-25 budget and to levy the city. Does that have to be the same motion or separate?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically the motion as presented, because we also are required to set our property tax rate, which it's a permanent rate, so we can't go up or anything on it.
I would take a motion. Second. Hey, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes unanimously.
I know it was a lot to go through all of those numbers and the budget, and I thank you for reviewing the documents. It's a lot of numbers. And we appreciate your effort. The next step, this will go to council on June 10th. And then council will also hold a public hearing at the meeting and then hopefully adopt the budget.
Anybody have anything else? Meeting adjourned at 8:40 PM.
Excellent.